Well, greetings. This is Dr. Dean Blevins, Pastor Dean Blevins at Kansas City First Church. And I know right now a number of people are probably somewhat sheltered or sequestered because of the coronavirus. So I thought I would just offer a series of sort of discipleship moments or devotional thoughts anchored around this period of time, this season of Lent. Normally, during this time, what you would get is a lot of Bible passages, a lot of stories that start with Jesus up in Galilee. And then as he makes his way down to Jerusalem, we would be exposed to just a lot of the sort of passages as Jesus sort of fixes his face toward Jerusalem and really says, if anyone wants to be my disciple, they must first deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. And so, thinking about that, one thing I thought we might reflect upon is the lives of what we would call the 12 disciples, but actually, we're going to look at a few more disciples than that. But it's starting with the 12 disciples who definitely did follow Jesus and their lives and stories. And what I'd like to do is actually take the disciples in pairs. And so, looking at two different disciples each session for this very, somewhat brief overview, and sort of talk about their lives, their personalities, and how through their lives we might reflect upon our own life as a disciple of Jesus Christ. Now, it seems pretty logical that the place to begin this story is with, Peter and Andrew. There are some things we do know about Peter and Andrew. First of all, they are sons of John, and they were born in Bethsaida. And then they later moved to Capernaum and apparently did sort of work together as fishermen along with James and John. Some other things that we do know is that they were both probably early followers of John the Baptist. And so these were brothers who were pretty close to each other. Tradition normally has Peter as the older of the two brothers. Whether we can just absolutely verify that or not is pretty hard to do. But since Peter appears to be the older brother and probably the most known of the two brothers, I thought we'd talk about Peter first and Peter the disciple and what I like to call Peter as Mr. Impulsive. I'm not going to quote scripture passages to you, but can provide those if you need. But I think it's kind of interesting to follow the storyline of Peter. Right from the very beginning when Jesus calls them to become fishers of men. And if you remember the famous story where they're out fishing and Jesus says, cast out your nets on the other side. They've had a really bad day, not being able to catch anything. And all of a sudden their whole boat is swamped with fish. And Peter sort of jumps out of the boat and into the water, gets himself all wet and heads right to the shore to be with Jesus. Peter being sort of all wet is a kind of common theme through several of the stories. Another time when Peter sort of impulsively jumps out of the boat is when Jesus is walking on the Sea of Galilee during a storm, and Peter is trying to follow him, is doing okay till it looks down, kind of sees his feet in the water and starts to sink, and it takes Jesus's hands to reach out and pull again another all wet, impulsive Peter back to safety into the boat. And the other story I always love about Peter is one other time when he wanted to get all wet. It's the story in the upper room when Jesus is beginning to wash the disciples' feet as a part of that lengthy passage in the book of John. And Peter says, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? I ought to wash your feet. And Jesus says, no, it's right and proper for me to wash your feet. And Peter says, well, if you're going to do that, let's just give me a bath. I want to get all wet from you, to clean me completely. To which Jesus says, okay, Peter, enough of this. Feet's fine. There's 11 more of you I've got to deal with as well. And I hope you hear in those stories the kind of impulsiveness of Peter, the kind of desire to want to go all out, to be all in for Jesus, yet in the midst of that sort of discovering, his own immaturity, it seems like sometimes, but actually his own humanity in the way in which Jesus, Peter's desire to follow Jesus just puts him in some awkward spaces and awkward places sometimes. Obviously, we do know that Peter is also the one that uh, basically identified Jesus as the Messiah. If you remember the famous passage where Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And it's Peter who says that, and to which Jesus then says, "Well, blessed are you, Peter, and upon this rock," Peter's name meaning rock, so upon Peter, "I will build my church," and the famous understanding of Jesus giving the keys of the kingdom to Peter and elevating him to a very unique place. Only for Peter then, as Jesus begins to talk about his death and his crucifixion, Peter beginning to try to correct him, and Jesus having to say to the same person that he has bequested leadership, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And I don't think Peter's become Satan, but Peter's attempt to wrestle from Jesus's mission is a way in which Peter is becoming once more capitulating to a particular vision that Jesus knows is wrong. As a matter of fact, Peter also makes the claim much later that he would never deny Jesus. And as we know, particularly in the passion stories, the stories of Jesus during his time of arrest, Jesus tells Peter, "You're going to deny me 3 times." And as the story unfolds, Peter does just that. He denies Jesus 3 times and comes again to the limits of his own humanity. And it actually takes Jesus after the resurrection on the seashore, once more by the sea, probably Galilee, where he invites Peter back into the fold by asking him a threefold question: "Do you love me?" 3 times, and giving Peter the admonition, "Feed my sheep, take care of my sheep," reminding him of his true vocation, that we see Peter in both the fullness of his humanity and in really the full light of what Jesus can see in Peter. So Peter may be the most live out loud, living large, impulsive disciple that we have of the 12 disciples. But I think we should also remember Andrew. Andrew is really an important person. Andrew was also a follower of John the Baptist, and it was Andrew and his witness that actually invited Peter to see Jesus for the first time. It was the younger brother who went to the older brother and says, "You've got to hear and see this amazing man." And it was Andrew then who invites Peter into this relationship with Jesus Christ. As a matter of fact, we know when you look at both of these brothers that both of them were outstanding leaders. Peter, we know, did indeed assume that leadership in the book of Acts, and later, according to tradition, was crucified in Rome upside down, a martyr's death. But actually, we also know that Andrew was also a passionate preacher. He would continue to share the gospel with boldness, and later himself would face a martyr's death. And we know this through the early church historian writers like Eusebius, who was one of the first church historians in the very, very early part of the early church. But we also knew this through other forms and traditions. And so both Peter and Andrew became exceptional leaders as a part of their journey. I don't know about you, but as I sort of exit these 2 stories and think about the disciples, I have to ask myself, where am I in these narratives? Are there times for me, much like Peter, am I Mr. Impulsive? Have there been moments in my life when I tried so hard to follow Jesus in my own power and strength, my own humanness, and need Jesus's guidance and his empowerment and his forgiveness so that I can be the person that maybe I don't even see in myself, but I know Jesus has seen in me? Can I hear Jesus's words of correction at times and words of affirmation and really words that remind me of who I am sometimes in spite of myself, like Peter? But I also think about Andrew, and I have to be honest, I think Andrew pretty seriously in this conversation. Am I the live out loud bigger brother who has to have all the attention, or am I more that stable, albeit maybe even younger brother, who is willing to reach out and introduce Jesus to other people and to bring them into the sphere of Jesus and to, well, just be that kind of witness, if you will, that Andrew was in and through my life. Two disciples, two different types of personalities, two different stories of two brothers uniquely wed together, but an important part of this journey. I hope as you think about this particular devotional that you'll take time to spend time reading scripture about each of these brothers and just begin to ask yourself, where am I in their stories? And how is it that God is speaking to me even during this time when I am at home and I have plenty of opportunity to reflect upon truly what Jesus has in my own life? Well, hopefully we'll see you for another presentation, and blessings to you.